Welcome to Analysis. I'm John Rees. A devastating new report has led to fresh accusations of Israeli war crimes and genocide in Gaza. The report is from the internationally respected Human Rights Watch. It focuses on the way in which Israeli destruction of the water supply in Gaza has led to an existential threat to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. I prepared this report earlier. Human Rights Watch has accused Israel of using the water supply in Gaza as a weapon of war. The new Human Rights Watch report says that the Israeli destruction of the water supply and sewage system is deliberately denying Palestinians a basic human right. Such accusations will reinforce the claim that war crimes are being committed in Gaza, as the denial of access to adequate water supply is purposely targeting the civilian population by an occupying military force. The report argues that the Israeli authorities have deliberately inflicted conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction of part of the population of Gaza by intentionally depriving Palestinian civilians there of adequate access to water, most likely resulting in thousands of deaths. The report demands that governments and international organizations should take all measures to prevent a genocide in Gaza, including discontinuing military assistance, reviewing bilateral agreements and diplomatic relations, and supporting the International Criminal Court and other accountability efforts. The 179-page report, Extermination and Acts of Genocide, Israel Deliberately Depriving Palestinians in Gaza of Water, found that Israeli authorities have been intentionally depriving Palestinians in Gaza of access to safe water for drinking and sanitation needed for basic human survival. Israeli authorities and forces cut off and later restricted pipe water to Gaza. They rendered most of Gaza's water and sanitation infrastructure useless by cutting electricity and restricting fuel. They deliberately destroyed and damaged water and sanitation infrastructure and water repair materials, and they blocked the entry of critical water supplies. The report found that Israeli authorities have also barred nearly all water-related aid from entering Gaza, including water filtration systems, water tanks, and materials needed to repair water infrastructure. In addition, Human Rights Watch found that some statements from senior Israeli officials calling for cutting water, fuel, and aid in tandem with their actions have amounted to direct and public incitement to genocide. Now, the Human Rights Watch report focuses on water supply, but Israel's behaviour more generally has also been described as genocide by Amnesty International, and of course the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is wanted for war crimes on an international arrest warrant issued by the International Court of Justice. So, what will happen as a result of the increasing number of voices that are calling out Israeli genocide? Let's talk about all this with Ahmed Benchemsi, who's from Human Rights Watch and who is the author of that report on the water supply. Ahmed, welcome to the programme. Just give us a sense of why the Israeli treatment of the provision of water is so devastating that you could describe it as a war crime or as part of a genocide.
Sure. But before I answer your question, I'm not the author of this
I'm
report. I
sorry.
mean, the report has been drafted by the whole
Yeah.
organization. It's always a group work. I'm the spokesperson for the organization, but I'm happy to answer your question. The key facts in this report is that since October 2023, since October 7, Israeli authorities have deprived Palestinians in Gaza of access to the amount of water needed for survival. This is very deliberate. And how did they do that? By four means. Number one, they cut off the faucet, like the direct supply of water coming from Israel to direct pipelines. But not just that, they also cut off the electricity which is needed to operate water pumps, desalination plant, and sanitation infrastructure. They cut off the fuel needed to run generators in the absence of electricity, and that's how like the supply was cut. But that was just the beginning of it. They also deliberately destroyed water and sanitation infrastructure by attacking them, and sometimes in direct ground attacks. According to the World Bank, 84%, or more than 84% of the water and sanitation infrastructure in Gaza has been either destroyed or damaged. And the World Bank estimates that rebuilding it could take decades. And we're talking about 4 out of 6 wastewater treatment plants destroyed. and these are essential to maintain the minimum level of hygiene necessary to maintain a human life. The water reservoir supply in Rafah, as you know, Rafah is the city where most of the Palestinian internally displaced Palestinians of Gaza are taking refuge since they have been forced there by the Israeli army. Well, they destroyed the water reservoir there, and we have evidence that the Israeli ground forces, were sometimes in control of the areas where they destroyed water infrastructure, which means the destruction was not incidental to attacks on military objectives, but it was deliberate. They were in control. They had no reason to blow it up, and yet they did. The third way for them to block access to water is blocking the entry of water supplies. So they cut the water, they cut the electricity, they cut the fuel, they damage the infrastructure, and then they prevent humanitarian organizations from providing water aid and water supplies. They even went as far as attacking water repair workers and humanitarian workers who were trying to rebuild those pipelines or any part of the water infrastructure. The end result of that is that while the World Health Organization says that the minimum amount of water needed for bare survival for a human being is 15 liters per day, for more than a year, Palestinians in Gaza have been receiving 2 to 9 liters. And this is the result of a very deliberate Israeli policy. This is what led us to the legal finding that Israel was committing extermination. Extermination is not just a word or a grave sounding word. It's a legal determination. It means that the Israeli authorities' actions amounted to the intentional creation of conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction of part of the civilian population in Gaza. This as a part of a mass killing of the civilian population, and as a state policy, it is called extermination. We also determined that it is a genocidal act because they have intentionally inflicted on Palestinians conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. This is not me talking. I am quoting the 1948 Genocide Convention. So this is one of the gravest findings we came to since we documented the atrocities that occurred starting October 7 until today.
And so, what happens to the report now? What do you hope that its impacts will be? For instance, will it have an impact on the proceedings that are happening in the ICC?
Well, we certainly hope so. I can't speak for the ICC or the ICJ because they have their own procedures, and we absolutely respect their procedures and their independence. However, I understand that part of their work to document violations consists also in gathering reports by credible organizations such as Human Rights Watch. For example, when the ICJ ordered the provisional measures 3 times, ordered Israel to take provisional measures to avoid the commission of genocide 3 times during the past year, they relied on their own investigations first and foremost, but they also relied on a couple of investigations that were done by outside organizations, not the ICJ. One of those reports was one of ours, where we determined that Israel was using starvation as a weapon of war, which is a war crime of epic proportion. So this report, adds to the pile of damning report. More and more organizations and international bodies call this genocide or act of genocide. So this will be, when the time for justice arrives, a pile of evidence will be there. That's what we work for.
And what do you think the timescale of that is? Because I think it's apparent to many people now that although Israel's military superiority is devastating the lives of Palestinians in many ways, directly and in the kind of ways that your report documents. It's also clear that Israel is, if you like, losing the political battle over its international status. But for many people, these timescales are badly dislocated. The speed with which Israel is suffering political damage isn't fast enough to make a difference to what they're doing on the ground. Do you see any closing of the gap between those two timescales?
There is a lot of truth to what you're saying, and this is a source of major frustration for all human rights activists, such as myself and my colleagues, and many human rights activists who've been working to document grave violations in Gaza. The time of international justice is long. that is like it is a source of deep frustration, but there's I don't know if we can do anything about it, because it takes a long time to amass documentation, to start legal procedures. So the procedure that was started by South Africa at the International Court of Justice has started already, and the court has ordered provisional measures pretty quickly in a matter of a few months. However, the trial itself, upon which, or at the end of which, the ICJ will determine whether Israel is committing genocide or not per ICJ's legal analysis, this will take many, many years. And you're very right. On the ground, the situation deteriorates every day, and it is today already one of the worst humanitarian catastrophes in the planet. So reconciling the time of international justice and what's happening on the ground is one of the major sources of frustration for humanitarian and human rights workers. But I mean, we work with the cards we're dealt, and we don't stop documenting violations, hoping that the publicity around it will constitute pressure, not just against Israel, but also against the allies of Israel. The US is providing Israel with weapons again today, even though we have documented times and again how those weapons have been used to commit grave human rights violations, in violation not only of international law, but also of US internal law, which provides serious vetting of any arms sales to a foreign country. But that vetting apparently didn't see what was happening on the ground, which again consists in genocidal acts.
Now, we're familiar, and I guess that you are even more familiar than we are, with countries that have human rights records that are held up to examination in the way that Israel's has been here. We're used to seeing them reject the findings of reports like this, often rejecting the findings of international bodies. But has it happened in your experience that there's been such a total and complete unwillingness on the part of a state to deal with any criticism from anybody, other than to say, oh, these people are anti-Semitic or something?
The willingness to blind themselves on the international finding on the findings of the international organization is apparently is unfortunately something that is widely shared within autocratic governments or government that routinely violate human rights. What is different in this case is not the attitude, the denialist attitude of the government that is committing those violations, but rather the international pressure piling on that government, because the whole world is watching. And what is happening in Gaza, again, the word genocide has been mentioned, which is the gravest possible crime by several human rights organizations. We are one of the ones who said that word, but not just us. There's also Amnesty International, there's also various bodies of the UN. So it's the pressure that I believe is unprecedented, and for a good reason. It just matches the scale of the atrocities that we are witnessing on the ground.
It's quite unusual, though, is it not? I mean, it's not unusual to see North Korea behave like this. It's quite unusual to see a state which famously claims to be the only democracy in the Middle East, which is, after all, part of the European Song Contest, which which prides itself on being a Western democratic state, at least to its own audiences.
Well, it's neither Western nor democratic. I mean, it's pretty obvious that Israel is located in the heart of the Middle East. As for it being democratic, I don't know if we can call democratic an apartheid state, because Israel is practicing apartheid against Palestinians. And that is a conclusion we got to 2 years ago in 2024. 3 years now, we're in 2025 now. And we're not the only ones. Amnesty said it as well. And I believe that many, officials throughout the world, including UN officials, have also used that word. And again, just like genocide or acts of genocide or crimes against humanity, apartheid is not just a word. Because when Israel defends itself against such accusations, they treat them as if it were some kind of verbal escalation by saying, oh, people who say that are anti-Semitic, or they are I don't know, exaggerating. They pretend to believe that it's some sort of emotional statement or some sort of a statement of opinion. But they know better than that. They know absolutely what this is about. It is not about stating an opinion. It is not about saying anything emotional. It is about a legal determination that was carefully, determined through the examination of facts. And that examination of facts took many months and the work of dozens and dozens and dozens of people. So we work for 2 years, we get to the word apartheid, which is again a legal concept, and they debunk that by saying, oh, by having an emotional statement. Same thing for acts of genocide. They pretend that it's a war of words. It is not a war of words. It is a legal determination based upon examined and verified facts, and those facts are damning.
In your experience, can you remember another case where a state has been able to utilize its armed force in such a determined and consistent manner to seemingly squeeze the very basic elements of life out of a society in the way that the Israelis seem to be doing in Gaza?
Well, if you're asking about past genocide determinations, I think that's also the point of your question. We have made, we I mean Human Rights Watch, we have found genocide in a couple of cases in the past. There was a campaign against Kurds in Iraq in 1988, which we call genocide. The mass killing of Tutsis in Rwanda in 1994 as well, we called it a genocide. Just as the massacres in Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1995, and we acknowledge the findings of the International Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, which used the word genocide. We also concluded to the commission of acts of genocide in Myanmar by the Myanmar security forces against the Rohingya minority pretty recently in 2017. Even more recently, we determined that there were possible acts of genocide. We didn't make a full determination, but we got close in Darfur, in Sudan. So, unfortunately, examples of ghastly violations and massive violations of human rights, to the extent that the word genocide is involved, are not that rare, unfortunately.
Do you think that for all the seemingly endless horror that we see unfolding in Gaza, that a political watershed has now been reached for the Israeli state? I mean, you talk about the arc of justice being long. Perhaps in some other struggles, we might think of the Soweto uprising, completely defeated at the time, but widely seen now as a moment when the apartheid state in South Africa lost a great deal of its authority internationally. We might think of the Tet Offensive, years before the Americans left, a military defeat, but widely seen as a turning point. Do you think those are useful parallels?
Probably, but it might be a bit too early to answer that question. I mean, the human rights activism and advocacy is a long game. It always takes time because our point is to change the perception of the international community based on facts, proven facts, verified facts, and legal determinations. No, and now, if there is a political power that is willing to play ball, if I might say, and move based on those conclusions, and impose sanctions or take effective measures to stop massacres, as it happened in former Yugoslavia, for example, then things happen quickly. If there is a strong resistance, which is the case in Israel now, and which was the case also in apartheid South Africa, it takes many years. But what we're witnessing is the erosion of the international image and international respectability of governments that are credibly accused of committing grave human rights violation by a bigger and bigger and bigger part of the international scene. This cannot be a situation that lasts forever or lasts for even the long term. Now, what term are we talking about? Are we talking years? Are we talking decades? Are we talking, maybe a certain number of years? I don't know. It is a long game play. That's the game we play. I wish we human rights activists had other tools for something that would guarantee efficiency immediately and impact immediately. Fortunately, again, we work within the confines and the procedures of the international human rights system. They might be frustrating sometimes, but these are the cards we are dealt, and we play with them.
Just let me ask you about the kind of knock-on effects of the deprivation of water on this scale. There are obviously going to be impacts on health. impacts on long-term disability and that kind of thing. Have you got some sense of how long Palestinians, even if the situation were to change tomorrow, will be living with the impact of this?
Well, I can't talk about the future. The only determination that I can give you is what I mentioned earlier about the 84% of the water infrastructure that was destroyed according to the World Bank. The World Bank say that it will take years and years to rebuild. Now, I can give you some hard stats about the immediate impact on health, what was already being recorded. There's a letter that was sent to President Biden of the US by a group of 99 American doctors and nurses who all volunteered in Gaza at some point in the previous year. They co-signed a letter that they sent to the Biden administration in October, 3 months ago. In that letter, they estimated again, we're talking American doctors. This is not Hamas or Palestinians. This is American doctors who are supposed to be, they're Americans. And they sent it to their own president. And they're saying that there is 60,000 deaths attributable to malnutrition and dehydration as of July 2024. That was 6 months ago. Those 60,000 should be added to the 45,000 who died directly in attacks and to the estimated 10,000 or maybe more bodies who haven't been dug out of the rubble yet. So we're talking here more than 100,000 deaths. As for survivors and the ghastly diseases, I have also some data that I could give you. There have been 7,000 recorded cases of acute watery diarrhea, which can be fatal if not if it's not treated immediately. And this is the estimation of the World Health Organization. Also, World Health Organization, another estimation, they estimate to, no, it's not an estimation actually, it's a recorded number, 132,000 recorded cases of jaundice, which is a sign of hepatitis A. 225,000 recorded cases of skin diseases, 1 million cases out of a 2 million people population of acute respiratory infections. So to summarize, more than 100,000 deaths estimated, and pretty much all the population suffering one grave illness or another. And this is a population that has been widely displaced in a way that we said that in the previous report constituted again a crime against humanity. It's, I
Okay.
mean, whatever the angle, it's a humanitarian catastrophe.
Okay. That's Ahmed Benchemsi from Human Rights Watch. Thank you very much for joining us and bringing home graphically to us the fate of the people of Gaza at the moment. And of course, in future editions of Analysis, we'll be following up that report with consistent reporting on what's happening to that population and what the state of the conflict is with Israel. But for now, thanks very much for watching.